Hey guys, it's Cece, and today I am here to do the most intense video. I have so much to talk about. Today, I am ranking and reviewing every single 2019 release that I read in 2019. I read a total of 46 2019 releases in 2019, which means that this stack this year is almost twice as big as the one that I did in 2018. In 2018, I only had 24 releases to talk about. Today, I have 46. So we're gonna get through these fairly quickly. If you have never watched a ranked and reviewed video from me before, let me give you a quick outline of what is going to happen in this video. I am going to be talking about every single 2019 release that I read in 2019 in order of how much I liked them. So we are going to start with my lowest rated books, work through every single 2019 release up to my highest rated books. Every single book on this list, I'm gonna let you know how I got that book, if it was sent to me, if I purchased it, stuff like that. I'm gonna give you a star rating and a quick 1 to 2 sentence review of that book, except for the books that appeared on my favorite books of the year list. 10 of these books that I read in 2019 were 5-star books, and I talked about all 10 of them in my favorite books of the year video. So I'm going to show them to you. I'm going to tell you how I got those books, but I am not going to give a full review. Please just go ahead and watch my favorite books of the year video for a full summary and all my thoughts about those books. So I hope that all makes sense to everybody. If it doesn't, just follow along, I will explain as I go, and let's just go ahead and jump in because we have so many books to talk about. So my least favorite 2019 release that I read in 2019 was Here There Are Monsters by Amelinda Berube. I got this as an ARC at Book Expo. Actually, I didn't go and grab this, someone else had this ARC and they didn't know what the book was, and so I said I would take it because I had heard of this title before. It is a YA horror. It's about sisters, an older sister who has left her younger sister behind, and then the younger sister goes missing, and Deirdre, the main character, blames herself. This isn't scary at all. It builds to absolutely nothing, and I hated every single character. I gave this 2 out of 5 stars. Next up, we have My Life as an Ice Cream Sandwich by E.B. Zoboi. This is also an ARC that I got at Book Expo. This is a book set in 1984 in the summertime in New York City. It's about a young girl who is from Alabama, where she has lived with her mom, and because of stuff that's happening with her grandpa, she is sent to live with her dad in Harlem for a specific amount of time, and she's a real nerdy girl, so she isn't really fitting in with everybody else in Harlem. It seems like the author was attempting to write an autistic main character, but that wasn't really clear enough, and not only that, but everything wrapped up super quickly at the end of the book in a way that made it seem like if you just decided it, you didn't have to be autistic anymore. Like I said, none of those things are specifically laid out. It just, the end of this book really didn't vibe with me if the author was going for what I thought she might have been going for. Honestly, this is potentially my least favorite book that I read in the year, just because, the rep seemed questionable. Next up, we have The Devouring Grey by Christine Lynn Herman. I wound up with 2 different copies of this book. I had an ARC that was sent to me by a friend, and the publisher also sent me a finished copy of the book. This is supposed to be The Raven Cycle meets Stranger Things. Basically, it read as bad Raven Cycle fanfic that didn't do anything nearly as well as the Raven Cycle did. It was forgettable, and I didn't like it. 2 out of 5 stars. Next up, we have Last Night in Nuuk by Niviaq Korneliussen. This is a book that I pre-ordered for its American release. This is supposed to be about queer nightlife in Greenland, and a lot of that was really interesting. I really liked the stream of consciousness that was used in a couple of different chapters, but the rep for trans characters was really rough. This was written by a cis author, and there was one trans character whose entire narrative was just built to uplift all of the cis queer people. Also, the trans person didn't even realize they were trans on their own. A cis person had to tell them. Yikes. Next up, Pan's Labyrinth by Guillermo del Torro, Cornelia Funke, and I forget every time, Alan Williams. This is a book that I purchased with my own money from Barnes & Noble. This is a retold version of the Del Toro film Pan's Labyrinth, and it was interesting. It gave me some insight into the movie that I didn't have before, but it lacked Cornelia Funke's style, which is what I was after, and it honestly just was pretty forgettable. 3 out of 5 stars. Next up, The Black Mage by DJ Kirkland and Daniel Barnes. This is a graphic novel. I got the ARC at Book Expo. This is a Harry Potter inspired graphic novel about the first black boy to go to this magical school that is basically run by white supremacists. It was interesting, but went by way too quickly, and I didn't really love the art style at all, so this was kind of forgettable as well. 3 out of 5 stars. Next up, Last Ones Left Alive by Sarah Davis Goff. This is an arc that I specifically requested from the publisher. This is a zombie story. It follows a young girl in Ireland who has only ever known 2 people, her mom and her mom's partner, Maeve. It's about isolation and zombies, and I have watched a lot of zombie media, so ultimately I didn't think that this provided that much. If you've read or seen anything related to zombies, you probably know exactly how this book is going to go. It only got interesting in the last chapter, so 3 out of 5 stars. Next up, You Asked for Perfect by Laura Silverman. I requested this arc specifically from the publisher. This is about Ariel, who is an advanced student in high school, but he starts falling behind in a certain subject, so he gets a tutor and then starts to fall for that tutor. This is a male-male romance about anxiety, particularly school anxiety. It was interesting. I just didn't really like the writing style, and the plot was kind of all over the place. It felt like this book couldn't decide what it wanted to focus on, and the male-male romance was really not there. So, an interesting look at school anxiety, but ultimately I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. Moving on to Wilder Girls by Rory Power. This is a hard copy that I purchased myself at Barnes & Noble. This is a YA horror book about girls who have come down with this mystery illness that transforms their bodies, and they are quarantined on this little island where they used to go to school, and then one of the girls goes missing, and Hetty, our main character, really wants to find her. This book suffered from a distancing issue in that I didn't really care about any of the characters because I always felt like I was at a distance from them. I didn't get to know them. I couldn't tell you that much about any of these characters. Also, we were promised horror, and I really don't think that this book was that intense or horrific. There was a lot of fancy writing to write around the fact that it was supposed to be creepy, but there were only a couple of scenes where it actually managed to do that. I think my expectations were just too high on this one, so I was really let down. Ultimately, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Moving on to a trade paperback, Shades of Magic Volume 1 by V.E. Schwab and Andrea Olimieri. This is the first part of a comic series prequel to the Shades of Magic trilogy. It's had a super interesting story and a main character I was incredibly interested to learn about. It's a character who appeared in the Shades of Magic series, and I was fascinated by him, and this is like his youth, his backstory. I loved that, but the art style was so bad I couldn't tell what was happening for a lot of this comic. Legitimately, it was hard to look at because I couldn't tell what was happening, and I think in a comic, you need the art to be able to tell the story too, and it just wasn't doing that. So I gave this 3.5 stars, maybe more of a 3. I loved the writing, I loved the story, I couldn't look at it. Next, I want to talk about Small Town Hearts by Lillie Vale. This is another arc that I requested from the publisher. This is a sweet romance set at a coastal town where a girl who has lived there all her life starts falling for one of the summer boys who is just there as a tourist. The main character is also bi and dealing with her ex-girlfriend being back in town. This is really sweet, and I think heavier in some places than I was expecting. Like, it really deals with the main character and her relationship to her best friend, and how that has completely altered as they have taken these 2 different life paths. Also about really struggling to make a relationship work, which I think is awesome. This was a sweet book, a great summer read. I gave it 3.5 stars. Next, I want to talk about Kings, Queens, and In-Betweens by Tanya Boteju. I requested this from the publisher, and they sent me a finished copy. This is about a biracial girl, Nima, who is queer and coming to terms with the fact that she's super in love with this straight girl, and then Nima discovers drag culture in her town and becomes a part of this family of drag queens as she starts falling for another girl. This is a really joyful book about drag culture and queerness and being queer in a small town, but ultimately being totally accepted by everyone around her. My issues with this were mostly that it dropped a couple of storylines that we really could have used some resolution for. If those stories had been resolved, this would have been a super highly recommended big fave book, but for now I gave it 3.5, maybe 4 stars. Moving on, I Hope You Get This Message by Farah Rishi. I got this copy at Book Expo. I was also sent a finished copy by Owlcrate. This is a book following 3 different perspectives, and it is about an Earth that has just found out that aliens are going to destroy the planet in a week. Well, they're not going to destroy the planet, they're going to destroy humanity. Earth was kind of their pet project, and all the aliens are kind of like, we need that land to survive and the humans keep killing it, so I think we should destroy the Earth in a week. So this is about 3 characters who are desperately trying to find people before time runs out. This is a really heartfelt book that I loved. There is a queer main character, as well as a Pakistani main character who is on the search for his sister, who is also queer. It's an interesting look at the world ending that's set very, very present day and is incredibly political, but is also just a fascinating look at the Earth winding down and these 3 teenagers as the Earth winds down. I could have used a bit more from the ending, but that's just a personal choice. I ultimately really liked it, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, we have The Giver by Lois, Lowry, adapted and illustrated by P. Craig Russell, and I was given this copy by Morgan over at Morgie Reads. This is a graphic novel adaptation of the book The Giver, and it is pretty much word for word an adaptation of The Giver, which is one of my top 5 favorite books ever. So I liked this. I love seeing my favorite stories visually, but I don't think that this offered anything new to the story. I don't think we got anything new by seeing this adapted because it was such a straight word-for-word adaptation that it didn't feel like I was discovering anything new just by seeing the art. So I liked it, but it doesn't compare at all to the book The Giver. I wound up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, we have Genderqueer by Maya Kababe. I purchased this copy at Book Expo. This is a memoir about Maya coming to terms with being genderqueer and asexual. It's a fascinating look at Maya's life, as well as an instructional guide to being genderqueer, to being asexual. It's a fascinating and necessary educational tool that I really enjoyed. The art style is super accessible. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Yet another graphic novel to talk about. We have Hotel Dare by Terry Blas and Claudia Aguirre. I was sent 2 copies of this book, an e-copy from the author, and then I grabbed this copy at Book Expo. This is about Olive, Darwin, and Charlotte, who are siblings. Charlotte has recently been adopted and has joined their family, and the 3 of them are going to visit their abuela in her old hotel in Mexico. And while they are there, they discover that certain doors in this old hotel lead to different realities. This is super sweet. It's a story about family and siblings. Like I said, Charlotte is adopted. This entire family is Latinx. Olive describes herself as queer. It's just very heartwarming and sweet, and I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, we have Star World by Audrey Colthurst and Paula Garner, and I was sent this arc as part of the Star World booktube tour that we did back in March. This follows 2 girls when their lives start to crumble for different reasons. This is about Sam and Zoe, and at one point Zoe sends a text that's meant for someone else and goes to Sam instead, and the 2 of them start to bond, even though they've never talked before, over creating this imaginary world together over text. This is a super delightful book about friendship, about relying on people, and about people coming into your life at the right moment. Not necessarily about friendships that have always been there for you. Those are so important and emphasized in this as well, but this is a celebration of those people who happen into your life that cause a dramatic change, and it's really lovely. Zoe in this book is a lesbian, and this just handles a lot of stuff really well. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I have an anthology, Black Enough, edited by E.B. Zoboi. I absolutely love this anthology, and I got this arc via Arcs for Trade. I traded someone else for their arc. That's how I got this. I absolutely loved this collection. There are so many stories that I fell in love with, so many new authors that I discovered, and I think one of the strongest anthologies I've ever read. Like, so many of these stories were really, really good. I believe my favorite 2 were by Renee Watson and Justina Ireland, and I loved this. I gave it an overall average rating of 4 out of 5 stars. Next, we have The Weight of Our Sky by Hannah Alkaf. I was sent this finished copy by the publisher. This is set in 1969 in Malaysia, in the middle of the Malaysian race riots. So this is about a young girl who has OCD, though in the 60s we didn't have those words for it. So she believes that she is inhabited by a demon, and it is about her struggling and trying to find her mom in the midst of these race riots. This is a wonderful piece of YA historical fiction. I think it's incredibly valuable. It taught me about a point in history I didn't know that much about, and it sparked me to do more research into this part of Malaysian history that I just didn't know occurred. I really recommend this. I think it's fascinating. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, Stargazing by Jen Wang. This is a middle grade graphic novel about 2 Chinese American girls, Moon and Christine, and their friendship when some really terrible stuff starts to happen to Moon. This is a completely adorable graphic novel that also deals with some very heavy topics, but it's mostly just a pure friendship story about these 2 becoming friends and being friends through the worst and the best of times. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I have so many 4-star reads to talk about. Like, I gave so many of these 4 stars. It's ridiculous. Next, I want to talk about The Tea Dragon Festival by Katie O'Neill. This is yet another arc that I got at Book Expo. Clearly, Book Expo was a significant part of my 2019. This is a prequel to the Tea Dragon Society. It is about a dragon who wakes up. He fell asleep and has been asleep for a while. And the main character, Rin, happens upon this dragon and just starts like, this is just a soft story about found family and loving each other with a non-binary main character. It's adorable and inclusive and lovely and nice, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Moving on to a couple of novellas, we have The Haunting of Tramcar 015 by P. DeJelly Clark. I specifically requested this arc from the publisher. This is a fantasy novella set in Cairo in 1912, and it is about what is supposed to be a very routine investigation into a haunted tramcar that turns into something a lot bigger. There's a lot more magic at work than they originally thought. This is an expansive and fascinating world. I fell in love with this world, with this author, and with the potential for new stories to be set in this same magical Cairo. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I also have Your Favorite Band Cannot Save You by Scott O'Moore. I requested this from the publisher as well, got it at the same time as The Haunting of Tramcar 015. This is a novella about a mysterious band that starts uploading tracks to their newest album, and it is kind of hypnotizing people, these different tracks. And we are following a nameless music blogger who discovers their music and becomes more and more intertwined with this band as they keep uploading music. There are going to be 10 tracks, and you're headed towards what is going to happen when they upload the final track. It is absolutely off the wall, but it's disturbing, but it's also super fascinating, and I loved reading it. And I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, we have a middle grade novel, Two Night Owl from Dogfish by Holly Goldberg Sloan and Meg Wolitzer. This was sent to me by the publisher. It was unsolicited. It just arrived. I had never heard of it before it arrived on my doorstep. But this is about 2 young girls who discover that their gay single dads have started dating, and so the whole book is told via email between these 2 girls. It's adorable. It's like the gay Parent Trap story of my dreams. It just makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside because it's cute and it's so delightful and soft. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, we have Tarnished Are the Stars by Rosie Thor. This was sent to me by a friend from the publisher. This is YA sci-fi. Follows 3 main characters, a girl with a clockwork heart, a boy with a clockwork heart who is also the son of a potentially evil politician, and a girl who is the eyes of the queen. She's the queen's spy. It is fabulous. We have a female-female romance as well as a super soft aro ace boy. It's just cool. It's cool and it's dark and all of these different characters work together so well. This is a book that celebrates communication and being able to talk about your trauma, not as an excuse, but as a way of working through things as a team. I really celebrate it for all of that. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. Next, we have Pet by Akweke Emezi. I got this arc at Book Expo. I specifically had to hunt someone down and request that they go and grab a copy. This wasn't just sitting out on a table. I had to actively work to get it. This is about a world where monsters no longer exist, And then a creature crawls out of a painting and tells our main character that he is a monster hunter, and there is, in fact, a monster still in this world. You've got a black trans girl lead in the main role of this. It's by a black non-binary author. There is a side character who has 3 parents. The main character is selectively verbal and uses a lot of sign language. And this is a story about complacency and about how denial doesn't mean that something no longer exists. I really recommend it. It's one of the most unique books that I read in 2019, and I'm sure you're tired of hearing this by now. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next we have The Forgotten Girl by India Hill Brown. This is yet another arc I got at Book Expo. It was recommended to me by a friend who was working the booth at the time. I don't think I would have grabbed it otherwise, but I'm so glad that I did. This is a middle grade book that's kind of a ghost story. It's got a horror element. It's about a young girl when, during the first snowfall, she stumbles upon a grave, and it turns out that this grave was part of a forgotten, segregated cemetery. So there are some hauntings, there's some creepiness here, but it's also about the main character discovering segregated cemeteries, about unearthing a past of her town and a past of her own family history. Super educational and lovely middle grade novel. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Okay, I've got another Tor novella here. That is Miranda in Milan by Catherine Duckett. I requested this arc at the same time I requested those other 2 novellas I was talking about. This is a retelling, not as much a retelling as a sequel to The Tempest by William Shakespeare, and it follows Miranda going to Milan at the end of The Tempest, about her settling into this society where her and her father aren't totally accepted. It's about some mysterious happenings, and it's about Miranda falling for another woman at the palace. This is the Shakespeare retelling of My Dreams. I adored it. It's magical and eerie and celebrates the Tempest while also, like, questioning some of the power structures of the Tempest. It's brilliant. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. We also have Mooncakes by Wendy Zhu and Suzanne Walker. I got this copy for free at Book Expo. This is a graphic novel about a witch and a werewolf. They're both Chinese American, and Nova, the witch, uses hearing aids, and Tam, the werewolf, is non-binary. They were childhood best friends, and then Tam and Nova run into each other, and they kind of rekindle that childhood romance potential while also investigating some creepy stuff that's been happening in Tam's past. I love magical graphic novels. I think that they are delightful and sweet, and I live for graphic novels where people are nice to each other. I just love it when people are nice to each other, which I've said in videos before because it warms my heart. So if you're also into magic and people being nice to each other, this. Plus, Nova has 2, like, married grandmas. They're married to each other, and I live for them. They're perfect. Next up, I have How to Be Remy Cameron by Julian Winters, which I also got at Book Expo. This is about Remy Cameron when he is challenged to write an essay about himself, defining who is Remy Cameron. He knows he's black, that he's gay, that he's adopted, that he's someone's best friend, but he doesn't really know how to boil it down to explain who he is outside of those labels. I love this structure for YA books. Just find it really engaging. I love characters going on journeys of self-exploration, self-discovery, and Julian wrote such a masterful and excellent YA book here. It was beautifully written. I loved the experience of reading it. This is a strong 4 out of 5 stars, potentially leaning into that 4.5 star place. I forgot a book earlier, so we're just gonna put this clip in here, because I forgot about this book. Laura Jean Keeps Breaking Up With Me by Mariko Tamaki and Rosemary Valero O'Connell. So it's a queer book about an unhealthy relationship that I got a ton out of. There are also discussions of reproductive health, of abortion, and those were really interesting, and this is a really gorgeous book with gorgeous art. I think it's brilliant. I love both of the people behind this graphic novel, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Now moving on to The Stars and the Blackness Between Them by Janata Petrus. I was sent this book by the publisher after I specifically requested it. This is about Mabel and Audra. Audra is being forced to leave Trinidad after her mother discovered her with another girl. She's gonna go live with her father in Minneapolis. Mabel lives in Minneapolis and she is struggling with a mystery illness. And this is about these 2 girls bonding, potentially starting a relationship together, about celebrating blackness, black identity, about celebrating queer love. I talked about this a bunch in my December wrap-up, so maybe watch that if you want more thoughts. I think that this is an exemplary YA novel. Like, it's utterly unique. It's got these two voices that are so distinct and incredible. Honestly, my only issue is that I felt like a couple of the storylines weren't totally wrapped up by the end, and I would have loved if those had had some kind of conclusion. So ultimately, I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, but like, a huge, huge recommendation on this one that it also could have veered into 4.5 star territory. The next book I want to talk about is Middle Game by Seanan McGuire. I was sent a copy of this book by a subscriber. So Olivia from Stagey Bookish sent me this book from my Amazon wishlist. This is a book about twins, Roger and Dodger, who were created as embodiments of language and math. This is a book about alchemy and about two characters who, if they reach their full potential, could rule the entire planet. It's incredibly dark, but I love Seanan McGuire's writing. I adore the way that she crafts worlds, the way that she tells stories that are really eerie and have almost an old-fashioned feel to them. In this case, I loved this book because it has these weird timeline things happening where things are constantly changing, things are told out of order. It's really, 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 really good. I gave this 4.5 stars. We've also got Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I pre-ordered this copy of Daisy Jones and the Six. I have a full reading vlog up of this. This is basically a Fleetwood Mac inspired book that is told via interview with Daisy Jones and the band The Six. It is about them becoming rock stars in like the 70s, coming together, falling apart, writing music. My only issue with this book is that I think that there's a somewhat unnecessary twist near the end, but I sobbed through the end of this. I really enjoyed reading it, and I gave it 4.5 stars. Guess what? We have another Seanan McGuire book. That one is In an Absent Dream. This is the 4th book in the Wayward Children series, and I was sent this arc by the publisher. I love the Wayward Children series. This is a prequel following a character named Lundy, and it is set in a Goblin Market-inspired world. Basically, I think that this might be my favorite of the series, and upon a reread, I think I might give this a full 5-star review. I just lived for this high-logic fantasy world, and for Lundy as a character becoming feral, but also, like, super obsessed with detail. Those are just things that really interest me. So, lived for this book, loved this book. Gave it 4.5 stars. And the last book that I'm going to discuss in full is On the Come Up by Angie Thomas. I pre-ordered a copy of this book. This is about a girl named Bree who is 16 and has big dreams to be the next big rapper. She has some big shoes to fill because her father was this rapper who was really coming into his own until he died. This is a book about a passionate, angry girl who is trying to do the best she can for her family when they're struggling. It's passionate and interesting. It's about Bree's family struggling because they don't have enough money to pay their bills, and about Bree wanting desperately for her dream to make it possible to make their life easier, but also struggling with the fact that maybe this isn't the best way to help her mother. I love it. I love this book. I think it was well worth the wait for Angie Thomas's sophomore novel, and I can't wait to see what she writes next. I gave this 4.5 stars. The rest of these are all 5-star books, so I'm just going to tell you how I got the book, and you can go and check my favorite books of the year video if you want to hear more about them. So we have Salt Slow by Julia Armfield. This is a story collection that I requested from the publisher. All the Bad Apples by Moira Fowley Doyle. This is a YA fantasy with a lesbian main character that I requested from the publisher, and they sent me this finished copy. Water Runs Red by Jenna Claire is a poetry collection that was sent to me from my Amazon wishlist. It was sent by my friend Ash from Tea Leaves and Bookbindings. Real Queer America LGBT Stories from Red States by Samantha Allen. This is a finished copy that was sent to me by the publisher. The publisher also sent me an arc of the book. This is a nonfiction book about queer communities in conservative states. The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling is a sci-fi horror book with a queer protagonist that I pre-ordered. Next up, Call Down the Hawk by Maggie Stiefvater. I pre-ordered this copy of the book, and I was also sent an additional copy from Owlcrate. Tell Me How You Really Feel by Amina May Safi. This is a YA contemporary love story. I was sent an ARC from the publisher, which I requested, and then I went out and purchased this hard copy for myself from Barnes & Noble. We also have Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This is the enemies to lovers male-male romance that everyone has been talking about. I pre-ordered a copy of this book. I was also sent a copy from the publisher and sent a copy in Unplugged Book Box, so I was, you know, up to my ears in copies of Red, White, and Royal Blue this year. Second to last, Cantoras by Carolina de Robertis. I requested this book from the publisher and they sent me this beautiful finished copy. This is historical fiction about queer women in Uruguay starting in the 1970s. And the last book I'm going to talk about is my favorite 2019 release of the year, and that is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Motar and Max Gladstone. I got this ARC through Arcs for Trade on Twitter. And this is the weird time travel Romeo and Juliet female-female romance book that I will be hyping forever. Oh my god, friends, that is it. We did it. That is every single 2019 release that I read in 2019, ranked, reviewed. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm sure it was a long one, so please let me know if you liked this, if you want me to continue doing these videos every year, if you want me to just focus on some books. I'd love to hear your thoughts. In the comments down below, let me know what your favorite 2019 release was that you read. Other than that, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!